So I guess the hospital space is what I understand best, but there are other spaces within health with other decision makers as well. So firstly, going to primary care, to your GPs, they've got a lot of autonomy over the day-to-day decisions in terms of where they put their money, but at the same time they've got massive budgetary constraints, so they don't have very much additional money to actually invest in anything unless it's delivering that kind of direct cost saving for them as a practice. You then got your CCGs who kind of channel pretty much 80-90% of the NHS budget in an area. So Liverpool CCG, for example, the money for all of the different services, be that primary care, be that hospital care, all kind of comes through the CCG, and they will then commission services. So that might be the A&E department, the other departments within a particular hospital, the community teams, or the general practices, and they will commission those services and provide a budget for them, and often that goes through a tendering process, so there's some sort of idea of value for money behind that. So there's lots of different decision makers who will at that CCG level on what services they're providing. So if this is a larger service that affects people in the community more broadly, the CCGs might be the people that you want to speak to. If it's something that's more focused in hospitals or for smaller parts of the patient population, that will change where you're going to be directing some of those conversations. Within hospitals itself, again, we can draw a distinction between a product that benefits a particular specialty, a particular ward, in which case you kind of got three people who are your triumvirate, your three key decision makers. You've got your matron, you've got your clinical lead, and you've got your clinical business manager. Your matron is really interested in quality of care, so they are about ensuring that there's robust evidence for organisations like the CQC that we are providing safe, high quality care. They'll be managing complaints, and they'll be overall ensuring that the effectiveness of the care, the quality of the care is high. You've got your clinical lead who's interested in the clinical outcomes. So how can we improve outcomes for patients? How can we help them to get better and better faster? And then you've got your clinical business manager who's responsible for the budget for that ward or that department directorate, who will say, how can we get better value for money? How many, staff members do we need to deliver these services? So they work together in a team, but they're kind of like their three focuses. So if you've got a product that is there to improve quality of care, that is to make things safer, then you might be wanting to talk to your matron initially. If you're talking about improving outcomes, that'll be your clinical lead. And if you're talking about reducing costs, that'll be your clinical business manager. That's kind of mirrored then at the top levels of the hospital. So if this is an innovation that's going to have an impact across that whole hospital, you're going to want to be talking to your director of transformation. So they are responsible for the long-term strategic objectives of the hospital and saying, we need to deliver that 10% productivity improvement over the next 3-4 years. They'll be the person who will make larger investment decisions to help transform processes as well. So if it's something which will change the way that the wards work together, if it will change the journey that a patient has through that entire hospital, they'll help champion that. Your director of finance is responsible more for the day-to-day financial management of the trust. So they'll be interested if things have a direct cost saving. Equally, they may be the person who responsibly pushes back against poor investments, always going to challenge you more on that point, and identifying the appropriate budget as well, because it may be great. It may save money in 10 years' time. It may help us to, reduce some of the burden of the health service overall. But if they can't find a pot of money for it, it can't be done. So they're going to help identify that pot of money and work out where they're going to draw those resources from. Then you've got your chief nurse, who again is going to be responsible for that quality objective over the entire hospital, and your medical director, who's responsible for the clinical outcomes across that entire hospital. So they're complicated structures, and spending a little bit of time working with people who have that knowledge about how the sector kind of gels together and who to talk to, that's really, really important. Yeah, so I think particularly focusing on the health space, it's slightly more complicated than a lot of spheres that tech startups work in. And the additional complexity which makes it more challenging to bring a product to market within the health sector is the different buyers that you have for a product and where they get their money from, because at the end of the day it all comes from the taxpayer, all comes from the treasury, but the amount of spare money that someone might have in a budget for innovation, for investment, depends on exactly who they are and how they're funded and what they're funded for. So not only do we have a distinction between our users, who are likely to be the people using the device, but generally our customers are not a single individual, but a committee or a group who will review a procurement process, documentation, or consider a proposal to purchase new technology or invest in that new technology. So it'll be a group of different people all collaboratively taking a decision on whether to move forward, whether to put money behind something, and actually understanding the motivations of all of those different people in the room and what their roles are and what they're looking for is really important. So you don't just have one person who you're communicating with, not even one kind of entity, but it can be multiple entities sometimes, who are your discrete customer. Straight away, this needs to be right there from the very beginning, because you can have the best product in the entire world, but if it's not affordable, if it doesn't actually fit within the structures that we have at the moment or help to transform those in a meaningful way, if there's nobody interested in buying for that, then you've got to question the entire value proposition of your product or service. So getting those people involved from day one to say, I've got this idea, what do you think is really important? And because all of these people are really busy people, sometimes it can be challenging to have those conversations, but it is absolutely worth doing that. It's worth chasing them and saying, don't want to be a pain, but I want to try and solve this problem, and I just need some feedback on how I'm going to achieve that, where the value is going to be. And usually people will. They might take a couple of months to get back to you, but usually people will, because everybody in the NHS is aspiring to deliver better and more effective healthcare. Yeah, I think really, it's difficult to kind of accidentally come by their email addresses, that kind of thing. So, LinkedIn is a really, really great resource for that. And just, like I say, reaching out to people unobtrusively, just with that initial introductory message, make good use of that. There are other ways as well. You can attend some of these the conferences that go on nationally every year. You can just start ringing up the hospital and saying, want to speak to so and so. You can get in contact with hospitals' procurement teams. Some of them can be really, really helpful in terms of putting you in touch with key stakeholders and helping to broker some of those conversations going forward. So they're another great source. But like I say, there is definitely every reason to bring on board somebody, whether they're a clinician or whether they've been involved in the NHS in some other way, who has some of those personal relationships, because it can be difficult to get those initial conversations going. And there's lots of people at top level working on trying to help make those conversations a bit easier and help streamline this entire process of developing innovation within the health service. So in summary, if you want to provide value to those end users, if you want to provide value to patients or people with illnesses, then you also need to be providing value across the entire health ecosystem. That way you're going to drive most of the value. You're going to be able to produce a product which enables care teams to make better decisions, enable that kind of collaborative healthcare, and that we know is going to improve outcomes. So by being across the entire ecosystem, you're going to help change the story in a much more fundamental way, in a much more meaningful way, than if you just concentrate on one group at any one time.